As some of you may know, Walt Disney Studios will soon be known as Disney Adventure World. I thought it would be nice in the lead up to that new park opening, or reopening, I should say, to take a look back at the original idea for Walt Disney Studios and the transformation it has gone through over the past couple of years. Welcome to Factor Nostalgia, where we discuss everything theme park, then, now, and when. I'm your host, Sarah, and for today's episode, we're going to do a little retrospective on Walt Disney Studios. It is one of the more divisive parks among the Disney parks catalog. I say divisive, but it's not that divisive. People just straight up don't like it, generally speaking. And to that end, a couple years back, it was decided that Disney was going to pump a whole bunch of money into the parks, and a big chunk of that would go to the Paris resort. If you want to know about all the detailed plans of everything that will be coming to the second Disney gate, as we call it, the second park, then I suggest you go back and listen to the first episode we ever did on everything coming to Disneyland Paris, to Walt Disney Studios over the next couple of years. I will link it in the show notes. But before any of that was ever even a consideration, we have to go back in time to the opening of the original Disneyland Paris park, the main park. So, back in 1992, that's when the very first Disneyland Paris park opened. It was a project, the company at the time was headed by Michael Eisner, who is credited and also critiqued for a bunch of the stuff he did. One of the things he's credited for is in the early 90s, he was at the helm of the Disney company when Disney went through its Disney Renaissance with all the movies that essentially we grew up on, from The Little Mermaid, depending on who you ask, up until The Lion King or up until Tarzan. So yeah, all those, honestly, some of the best work that Disney has ever done in terms of movies. So the park opened in 1992. Now, the idea for the park was that they put so much effort into design. It was supposed to be the most beautiful version of a Disney castle park that existed up until then. So at that point, we had the parks over in the States, of course, the two resorts, I should say, and Tokyo was open. So when they opened Disneyland Paris, which at the time was called Euro Disney, which we'll get back to in a moment, they already announced that they were going to be opening a second park. And the original idea was to do that in 1996. And that second park was supposed to be inspired by or loosely based on Disney's MGM Studios park that they had over in Florida as a second gate. Long story short, Disneyland Paris didn't do very well when it first opened, or Euro Disney didn't do very well when it first opened. The numbers were terrible. People didn't like the park. People didn't show up. And that really didn't turn around until 1995-ish when Space Mountain opened. Now, we did a deep dive on Space Mountain as well, which I will also link in the show notes, where you can find out a little bit more about the history and what made this version of Space Mountain so special. But 1995 was the first time that Euro Disney turned a profit. This is also the time when they changed the name to Disneyland Paris. Before that, it was Euro Disney. And the reason they changed it is because Americans thought Euro Disney sounded very chic, But Europeans, if you slap Euro in front of something, we just associate it with something governmental, fiscal, not very appealing. So it felt a little cheap. So they changed the name to Disneyland Paris. Now, as we just mentioned, the second park was supposed to open in 96, but because of the terrible numbers coming out of Paris, Eisner decided to kind of kill all the expansion plans, all of them. So not just in Paris, everywhere. But once things started turning around in Paris, they said, you know what? We're going to go full steam ahead with all of these different expansions. So Walt Disney World in Florida got Animal Kingdom, California got Disney California Adventure, and we were getting our MGM Studios park. Of course, things did not go as planned, otherwise this would have been a very, very short episode. So the park finally opened in 2002, so quite some time later than originally planned. In 2002, the park opened as Walt Disney Studios, so an entirely different name than what was originally communicated. And the response was, I don't know, confusion. So the park opened, it wasn't very big, there weren't a lot of attractions, the setup was weird. So, yeah. Now, if you look at the original plans, like I said, the blueprint was essentially MGM Studios in Orlando. And that was already sort of questionable because that was more or less a copy of what Universal was doing on the West Coast in actual Hollywood or near actual Hollywood with movie sets that were being used. So, what Disney did in Florida is they built a park with studios that could be used for movie production. And the main attraction was a 2-hour tram tour to kind of show you behind the scenes, show you what's going on. But the complication was that nobody really wanted to shoot anything in Florida, where it was warm and sticky and swampy, and all the actors and writers and everything were out in California. So it was just a weird location for them. So that kind of fell flat a little bit. That didn't stop Disney from still using it as a blueprint for the Studios park in Paris, though. So let's take a closer look at what the park really looks like when it first opened back in 2002. Now, when you came into the park, that part hasn't changed until today. It has changed slightly. We'll get to that. But there was a big welcoming arch, kind of reminiscent of the old Hollywood days where studios would have this big gate that you would go through to get to the actual studio and the different sound stages of that studio. And that was the big marquee thing for the second park, but also the huge water tower with the big Mickey ears. It stands very tall. You can see it from a distance, and it kind of serves as a landmark, or as Imagineers call it, I guess, a weenie, which is something you should be able to see from everywhere, and that, you know, if you just walk towards that, it'll be okay. I think that was the original idea. In the end, though, since it's not exactly inside the Studios park, it doesn't really function the same way that, for example, the castle does. This is kind of speculation on my part that it was supposed to function as a weenie, but, you know, who knows? Those are the two things that kind of show you, okay, this is the Studios park, and it looks very welcoming. So when you enter the park underneath these arches, underneath this big yellow gate thing, and you see the open area with the Mickey fountain based on the Sorcerer's Apprentice from Fantasia, and it looks nice, especially when the sunlight hits it, and, you know, with the yellow colors that they have, the warm colors that they've used, looks great. Now, in Orlando, when you enter the park, you come into what kind of looks like this big Hollywood boulevard, and it's open and spacious and flat. What they wanted to do in Paris was the opposite. They thought, okay, we learned from this. What we're going to do instead is people are going to directly walk into a soundstage to immediately get into the vibe of, hey, this is behind the scenes from the movies. Coincidentally, this would also be the first land, I'm using quotation marks, which y'all can't see because this is audio, but the first land of Walt Disney Studios, the front lot. So you walk into the hangar, the soundstage, Studio One, And yeah, what can we say about this? The idea was to show different movie sets. So you would be able to see from different eras, from different decades throughout Hollywood, um, different buildings. You would be able to see the facades and how these sets were built up, which is cool in concept. In reality, that means that you walk into Studio One and you walk past what honestly looks like cardboard cutouts of a bunch of different things, different rooms, restaurants. And now on the right hand side was the restaurant Anculis, which is a quick service restaurant, was a quick service restaurant. And on the left side, you had some shops. There was, of course, a big one with merch and things, but then there was also a Pandora shop and a little bit more in the storefronts looked vintage, I should say. Yeah, vintage. I think that's a good description for it. You had a little 50s style gas station near the end. And once you exit Studio One, bam, front lot. Bunch of studio lots. What does that mean? It is all concrete everywhere. Now, we mentioned this also in the podcast, in the episode about what's coming to the Studios Park, that they're changing the paving of the park for this very reason, because concrete just isn't very inviting. I know it's close to reality, but it's just not very inviting. So, what else do we have in the front lot? Not a whole lot. As you're there, you can look around, kind of see that straight ahead is what looks like an old street in Hollywood. Same style, kind of 50s style. Looks cute, but none of it is functional. You can also turn right or you can turn left. I'm sorry, I'm just now realizing that that little street that I mentioned that's straight up ahead wasn't even there when the park first opened. It was purely for decorative purposes, but it was added later. Imagine that. Anyway, and this is why I kept all my park maps, you guys. So I went in 2002 and I still have that park map. So I can see what it looked like. You can also Google it, but I just enjoy looking at the old park maps. I'm weird like that. Don't judge me. Anyway, back to the story. We just exited Studio One in 2002. We are going to turn left. What's to our left? Well, we have a production courtyard and we have a backlot. We're first passing by the production courtyard, which has not a whole lot, to be honest. So as we're walking, we see to our left another soundstage, another hangar, and it has a banner over it saying Cinémagique. This show I mentioned also in a previous episode, but it was really about the magic of movie making. So it was a show that kind of mixed a little bit of live action and then showed a bunch of scenes from very famous movies. And it starred Martin Short. It's a whole thing. It closed down a couple of years ago. The full video is still up on YouTube. So I'll try to find a link and post it in the show notes, but it's very cute. If you're into old movies, which I am, you can really appreciate this. And I remember like when you were queuing for it, they would play these instrumentals for like old movies, very iconic soundtracks and themes. And I remember standing there and listening to the music from Gone with the Wind, which isn't a Disney movie at all, but they still played it. And it did something for the vibe. I appreciated it, to be honest. So, okay, not a ride yet, but a show. And not a bad one. Cool. We keep walking. The original plan was to already have Tower of Terror here, but due to all the financial constraints that were mentioned earlier, and even though things went a little bit better, they still didn't want to go fully ahead with it. So there was no Tower of Terror on opening day. That took a couple extra more years until they opened that one. But we keep walking. Now, all the buildings and everything are kind of in the 50s type style. It looks very nice. Um, but again, it feels very empty. It's open spaces, concrete, things like that. So we keep walking until we reach the back lot. Now, the back lot is where we're finally going to find our first attraction, which is Armageddon. Now, I've always kind of had a hard time describing what type of ride Armageddon was because it was very much focused on the special effects that you saw in the movie. And I don't remember a whole lot from it, just that it was there, it was loud, shaky, there was some fire effects, pyrotechnics. Um, Usually there would be some kid that started crying because they were startled. That's really all I remember. And I know some people really love it, and I don't want to disrespect that. It just didn't really make an impact on me. I'm sorry. It didn't. So we have that to the right hand side. Then on the left hand side, I've mentioned this in a previous video also. A small detail that I really liked is that there was the umbrella, the lamppost and the umbrella from Singing in the Rain, that you could kind of recreate the scene if you sort of half climb up on the lamppost, which has since been removed, much to my chagrin, because my brother and I would always kind of like to try to do the whole Gene Kelly move with the singing and dancing in the water. But they removed it. It's fine. Whatever. Singing in the Rain's not a Disney movie anyway. I'm over it. Sort of. We keep walking. And there we see Aerosmith's Rock and Roller Coaster. Now, this is a ride that already existed in America. And the reason I'm explicitly mentioning that is because the original ambition for the second park was that it would have a bunch of rides that were new and would come to the States later. So it was supposed to be the other way around. Except for, some rides here and there, like we were supposed to have the Great Movie Ride, but then a French version, of course. And I don't know what a French version of that would look like, but it was supposed to be a French version. Didn't happen. That's fine. We can live without it. This Rock and Roller Coaster, though, it has gotten a lot of criticism. So even the original apparently got some negative feedback in terms of, you go in and it's the ride itself is pretty empty. And for those of you that don't know, Aerosmith's Rock and Roller Coaster has since turned into Avengers Flight Force. And I had the same criticism of Flight Force, where it felt very empty. The difference for me, I really like the Rock and Roller Coaster for a couple of reasons. One, the immersion started in the queue. So the idea that you're indeed in Hollywood and at this big record studio, and the theming of that particular building was done well. So you walk in and it looks like a reception area, and there were signed guitars in glass cases behind the reception desk, and tour memorabilia, not just Aerosmith, but a bunch of different celebrities or rock stars, and so much to see while you're queuing for the ride. Then you go on it, and indeed it's dark and there's strobe lights and loud music, which isn't too eventful, but I could still appreciate it for what it was. And Avengers Flight Force, what it is now, it's a retheme, and it's the same thing where, they did their best on the queue. It's not as immersive as the Rock and Roller Coaster was, in my humble opinion. Like, there's some good animatronics and, all that. But it's not appealing enough for people to actually kind of wait and see what the story is and things like that. Also, I've never really seen a queue long enough for people that, to actually have to stand there and listen to the full story. You can basically almost always just walk on when I've been. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what always has happened to me. You could see like a 5 or 10 minute wait. There's a reason for that. Regardless. So we have 2 rides now in the Studios park. Cool. Cool. we keep walking because there is one more thing back here in the back lot, and that is a theater, an open air theater, which has a stunt show, a car stunt show, as all studio parks have. And even the stunts themselves are not, very original. You see car chases and cars driving backwards, and oh no, a car is cut in half. Oh no, there's a ramp behind this, and where did it go? And oh no, somebody's falling off the building. And, no disrespect to the performers, because I know it's intense and they did a very good job, but it was nothing new. Whenever we went with my family, we still went because there were people in my family who enjoy these car stunt shows, and again, with the pyrotechnics and the things and the fine, whatever. So we always went to the show, but for me, they always kind of felt like you've seen one, you've seen them all. Couple of years after that, they did introduce Lightning McQueen into the show briefly, so that was new. But again, briefly, it didn't really change the narrative of the show any particular way. Speaking of narrative, they did change it a little bit, I think, where they would ask for a volunteer from the crowd and show you, okay, and this is what happens and behind the scenes, and this is what the final product looks like, and okay, they try to make it look like an actual behind the scenes making of type of situation. Throughout the years, it became more of a storyline type thing. Right now, the theater, well, right now actually, at the time of airing, it's closed, but this past summer they ran Alice and the Queen of Hearts, and that's supposed to be back in the spring of 2025. So very, very different from a car stunt show. Let's see what else they're going to bring, because I haven't seen that show yet. I know I went earlier this year, but I didn't have time to actually go see the show. It's gotten mixed reviews. Some people absolutely love it, and some people walked out of it. So that is polarizing. So yeah, let's see. Maybe I'll be able to see it next year, and then I can let you know my thoughts. Anyway, we've reached the end of the left side of the park. So we walk back. Now, we could have also gone right, but straight ahead is the studio tram tour. Now, what I mentioned earlier is that, that's the big ticket item that they had over in Orlando. So you would think this one is just as impressive, right? Wrong. At least in Orlando, they tried to have active studios. We did not. So all we had was empty buildings, some props, and of course there was the canyon scene, which once again, you've seen them all. And again, no disrespect, but that's kind of, yeah. So that scene was called Catastrophe Canyon. And it did the whole thing with the shaking cart and the fire and the water and things like that. Another scene they showed you, which was quickly edited or disappeared, I guess, was from a movie called Reign of Fire, which I haven't seen or ever heard about other than this attraction. But it showed London, or a replica of London, I suppose, burning down. No other context, just, buildings on fire. Same goes for all the other props you saw. There was really no context. There was sort of a voiceover done by Jeremy Irons and, who was it? Irene Jacob? I don't know if I say that right. French actress, or at least partially French. So they did the bilingual version, Jeremy Irons and she did that together. Anyway, what I did like about the studio tram tour is that as you would go to queue up, because this was the big ride, right? This was the big one. And in front of the queue, they had Cruella de Vil's car from the live action 101 Dalmatians, the movie where Glenn Close plays Cruella de Vil. That car was right there. So that's cool. I don't know if it was the real one, probably not, but it looked pretty cool. Okay, yay, we've been on the tram tour. So we walked back towards Studio One because we said we could also go in the other direction towards the animation lot. Now, what would be going on in the animation lot? You guessed it, it's where all the toons go to work. So I say animation lot, it's animation courtyard. My bad, animation courtyard. So there are two big things here. On our left, we see the art of animation, which has artwork on display from Disney movies. Of course, once again, the original plan was that you would be able to see movies being made. Now, for a while, they did actually show people, or artists, I should say, sketching and things like that in the art of animation. It is currently also being used, I think, for classes for kids, and not just kids, but classes on how to draw certain Disney characters, as well as it's the home of the Frozen sing-along show. Um, but yeah, it was relatively small capacity, I think it was. And it didn't really, from the outside, you couldn't really see what was going on. So it didn't look very inviting, you know what I mean? So that was unfortunate. Anyway, we keep moving and we're going to go walk across the animation courtyard. And to our right, we see another theater, another hangar, another soundstage. Now, on the other one, we saw Cinemagique. And on this side, we see Animagique, which was a fun show, honestly. It I think it was sort of the introduction or like the first version of what we now have with Mickey and the Magician. Where in this case it would have been Donald Duck, who kind of goes through the backlog of all these Disney classics and goes through the musical numbers. You know, there's a Jungle Book scene, there's a Dumbo scene with the big pink elephants on parade. It's whole thing. It was a good show. I liked it, and I still vaguely remember the song. Na 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 na, Annie Chic. Yeah, that stuck with you all day. You thought It's a Small World was bad? No, this one was worse. But it was a nice show. Let me not, not everything was awful. The show was nice. All right, then we keep walking, and the final thing we encounter is Magic Carpets over Agrabah. Another attraction. Flat ride. Similar to Dumbo in the main park, where you have the little thingies, you go, you sit down on a magic carpet and it flies and you can make it go up and down and it goes in little circles. And the idea here is that you have Genie yelling instructions at you because he is directing this movie, Flying Carpets Over Agrabah. There's a set display behind it. And that's it. There's no views. There's no nothing. So recently, a little update on that one. It closed down, I think, 2 years ago for what we thought would be renovations, dismantling. Who knows? Because it took a very long time. But it is reopening, or it has reopened by now, and they changed it. There is no more Genie yelling instructions at you. It's no longer the idea of it being a movie set, but in line with what Disney Adventure World is going to become. It's like you're stepping into a movie now, allegedly. Again, I haven't been on it yet. I just saw some images. But my initial response, I'm not going to lie to you guys, my initial response was nobody asked for this. And you can fact check that. Like I texted people with a screenshot of it and saying nobody asked for this. So yeah. Okay. So we exit Flying Carpets Over Agrabah and we are done with this entire park. That's it. Them's the shows, them's the rides. Of course, there were some meet and greets. Back then when characters still roamed the park and you didn't have like the set meet and greet times. I mean, you did to an extent, but you still had more roaming characters. Oh, they did have a parade. They did have Disney Stars on Parade, which was a relatively short one. Was it Disney Stars on Parade? Disney Cinema Parade. That was it. Disney Cinema Parade. Disney Stars on Parade is what they currently have in the park. Or currently, not during Christmas season, but you know what I mean. So there was a parade. It was very short. You had the Disney characters in like these old style cars, and yeah, that was it. Once a day, I think it was. Yeah. So as you can imagine, this park was quickly dubbed a half-day park, which isn't a good thing, um, because it doesn't really help with things like crowd distribution or anything like that. Now, as you know, over the years, they've added a bunch of stuff. Tower of Terror opened a couple of years later, which was, of course, a big one. Also, in terms of theming, it did a lot for the area, I think, because it fit with the whole 1950s vibe that that area of the park had. But one of the big theming problems, we've gone over this in the other episode as well, is just that the whole studio thing doesn't really land here. And what doesn't help is that once you're in the park, everything is concrete. So in the main park, when you go from one land to another, you either have like the big gate showing you that you're now entering a different land, but you can see it everywhere. You can see it in the different ground, what they have on the ground, if it's tiling or a different color, or even the trash cans. Everything is themed, whereas in the studios park, everything is concrete. Everything is gray. And again, I get the vibe, but this park was created that way because it was cheap. It was done on the cheap. And Disney California Adventure got the same feedback. So that's another park that when Iger became CEO, I think the first time around, he put a bunch of money into it and a bunch of IP into it. And it became, more of an attraction in and of itself. Whereas now, still, Walt Disney Studios is still not a full day park, except if you're going to queue for Crush's Coaster a few times. But that can't be the intention. So, for context, since then, they've opened, like I said, Tower of Terror, Crush's Coaster. There's been a addition of a Cars flat ride. There's a little bit more food trucks and things. One of the bigger areas they added was Toy Story Playland, which I think is very cute because you walk into it and the idea is that you're a toy in Andy's backyard. Now, Andy is, of course, for the millennials among us because, and I guess Gen Z also, because Gen Alpha is going to think that these toys belong to Bonnie, which is a problem in all of its own. But, Toy Story Playland, when you walk into it, you see the life-size Buzz Lightyear. I say life-size, that's ridiculous. Buzz Lightyear is huge because you're supposed to be a tiny toy in the backyard. The little gates that, frame the pathway are made out of Kinects. There's little Christmas lights hanging everywhere, but because you're a tiny toy, they are huge. And the idea is that you're walking through tall grass. And I think it's very well done. And of course, that one contains attractions as well. So you have the Slinky Dog ride, you have RC Racer, and you have the parachute drop toy soldier situation. So that helped a little bit in terms of, adding more stuff to the parks. Right now, if you keep walking, you end up in what is supposed to be Remy's Paris. So Remy from Ratatouille. Ratatouille is not the name of the rat. Okay, the rat's name is Remy. And you walk into like his Paris, where you have the Ratatouille adventure ride. And during the winter, you also have the food stalls there where you can get like your mulled wine and things like that. So there's a lot more now already. And there are definitely some rides there that I don't want to skip if I ever go to Disneyland Paris. Can I fill an entire day there? Probably not. Avengers Campus, what used to be the backlot and the production courtyard, or part of production courtyard, I guess, is now Avengers Campus. Armageddon turned into Spider-Man, and as we mentioned before, Rock and Roller Coaster is now Avengers Flight Force. The Spider-Man thing, they just used the show building. It's a whole different ride. but the other thing is just a retheme. So, some stuff is done really well. Like the addition of Crush's Coaster was great, and it's exclusive to Disneyland Paris. It's a fun ride. It's a little short, but it's a fun one. So that one was very good. But then you have the Flight Force retheme of the Rock and Roller Coaster, which feels lazy. What will be coming up again? Check out the other episode. But a quick recap for you if you're wondering what's going on, if you're there now or you plan on going soon and you're wondering what are all these gates for. So in 2 years, 2-ish years, a year and a half probably, Walt Disney Studios will become Disney Adventure World. This will happen when the new part of the park opens, which is currently behind those gates, behind those fences, where we have the world of Frozen, or where we will have the world of Frozen. That's the biggest draw. There's more being added, but we will have the world of Frozen, including a Frozen Ever After boat ride attraction. There will be a Tangled flat ride, which is based, I think, on the lantern scene. There will be a boulevard going all the way up to World of Frozen, which will also lead up to a big lake, Adventure Bay, where this park will finally have its own nighttime shows on the lake. There's some images up by DLP Works, and they can actually, in their photos, you can see the installations in the lake for these nighttime shows and fountains and, cool stuff. So this park will double in size. And then a couple years from now, we don't know when exactly, but Josh Tomorrow, head of the parks, said during D23 earlier this year that it will be within 5 years. There will be another area added based on The Lion King, the animated movie. Even though the artwork showed the live action movie, it's not a live action movie. The CG movie, it'll be based on the animated movie, and it will contain a log flume style ride, which is supposed to be a really long one, like 15 minutes or something. But there are no additional details compared to what I shared in that previous episode yet. So I hope they come through with that. At the same time, I also hope they expand it, because one ride is a little stingy, you guys. But let's see. Oh, one more thing that might be good to know is that this Lion King area will be added where the studio backlot tour, it turned into cars. And with that, it was shortened already. And what's left of it will now become the Lion King land, allegedly. I saw some people kind of go, oh no, the studio tram tour. But I think those people are in the minority. I don't think anybody is truly heartbroken about that ride disappearing. But if you are, do let me know. I don't want to, speak on behalf of everybody because, obviously I can't do that. So if you feel strongly about the studio tram tour or what's left of it, do let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. So all in all, what can we say about the Studios Park? It is definitely a good thing that they're adding to it. How do we feel about all this IP being added rather than, original stuff? That's another discussion all on its own. And guess what? I also have an episode on that, which I will also link in the show notes for you guys. So let's see what the future brings. I have hopes. I have high hopes for this park, even though I really enjoyed the original behind the scenes type thing, because that's just always interested me. Even I could kind of see that it was a little bit bare bones. And, they had their reasons. Not good reasons, but they had reasons. So let's hope that once it becomes Disney Adventure World, it'll become a park in its own right that people can spend a full day at. And especially with the nighttime show coming, I'm excited for all that. So would love to know everybody's thoughts on what's happening, on what's going to happen with the Studios Park. If you've been, back when it was so super bare bones with only a handful of rides and shows, altogether a handful. Would love to know what you thought, what you think now, what you think of where it's headed. And with that, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. Please share this episode with a friend. I know it's a long one, but for those of us that are interested in this type of stuff, I couldn't really shorten it. I tried, you guys. So share it with a friend or family member or somebody who might be interested. Please leave a rating or a review in whatever app you're using to listen to this. And also make sure you subscribe. This is available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all the usual suspects. If there's a different platform where you think, hey, you know what, it should also be on this or that platform, do let me know, because I'm new at this. I'm still figuring it out, So help a girl out. So with that, once again, thank you very much for listening, and I will catch you in the next episode.